Hi everyone, my name is Jack Ananchenko. I'm a CTO and a co-founder at StellarSoft. Today I'm joined by Bream, CEO and co-founder at Valentte, a
Yeah,
UK-based home fragrance and skincare brand that's gone from basically packing soap at the kitchen table to over 25 million pounds a year in revenue, shipping thousands of orders a day, and while keeping everything in terms of manufacturing and fulfillment in-house. Luke, thank you so much for joining.
brilliant. Thank you for having me. Really excited to have a chat today.
Yeah. So look, just to start it easy, and I mean, lots of people already know your story, but as people know you from the kitchen table story and the crazy 5 year jump from half a million a year to 25 million a year. If we fast forward to today, what does world look like right now, and what are you personally spending most of your day to day?
So now the challenge is to grow beyond that. So our objective over the next few years is to get to 100 million in sales. I think what we're uncovering is that's a very different proposition. The actual the pathway is relatively the very skills that got us to this point, sort of scrappiness and a lot of decision making coming through me, and lots of ideas coming from me, and then I implement it with the team. Doesn't work as you get bigger. You know, we've got more than 200 staff now, and we're essentially having to unlearn all the skills that actually got us to this point. And I suppose the way to articulate it is to professionalize the business, to systemize the business, to build the system that's going to power the business going forwards. And it's very different. I'm having to bring in a new senior leadership team who've worked in much larger businesses, who know what good looks like. I'm having to redefine my own leadership skills, the way that I lead the business, and I'm looking at leaders who've made that jump successfully, because I've got to say it's extremely difficult. And I think most of this year I have been thrashing around this problem and not necessarily realizing that's the problem that I had. Because what I've come to realize is that it's relatively straightforward to grow, to acquire new customers in the modern age. It may be expensive, but it's relatively easy to do. What is not easy is to stop the wheels falling off while you're doing that growth. And I think you can reach. I was watching Leila Hormozi speak, and she articulated a message that most founders can get to somewhere between $3 million and $30 million a year in sales, depending on their industry, depending on the skills of the founders. Very few founders get beyond that, get through that without really a big transformation in their personal skills and the skills of the business. And that's exactly where we find ourselves at the moment, right in the middle of that. So it's a challenge and it's hard. There's a reason why businesses fall into a pyramid, and there are lots of businesses that are small and only a few very large businesses, because this next stage. I mean, I've been in business more than 30 years, and not with Valentte, but a whole series of businesses, and this is probably the most challenging phase that I've ever known, from an intellectual perspective, from solving problems, to actually realize what's really required to do that, and it's not easy.
Yeah, for sure. And based on what I've seen on the side from different other podcasts, you hired like heads of marketing, operations, and finance, like people who've seen 150, 500 million pound businesses in revenue. Did you have any like experience or a case where you were like, oh wow, we should have done that earlier moment from Brendan
100%. 100%. Look, I think business is a bit like that. You trundle along making mistakes, and then you suddenly wake up and go, God, if I'd only known that, you know. And it's true. If I ever lost the business, like most entrepreneurs, I'm pretty sure that I could build the business back up to the same scale we're at very quickly, because you've already gone through those lessons. So if I had my time again, or if I had this year over again, I would have hired senior people sooner. I didn't need them 12 months ago, but I needed them as we tripped over into this year. They would have made a big difference, because I would have avoided a lot of the pain that we've been through making mistakes, not really understanding what the true cause of that was. So, you know, what you need with a bigger business are really strong systems and processes and people and accountability and who does what, and very clear job descriptions. And and experts. So when you grow a business, what you tend to end, especially if you promote from within, what you tend to end up with is a lot of people, generalists. They're good at lots of different things. They're doing lots of different things. When you get to the scale that we're at and bigger, what you actually require are specialists. And that's quite a tough realization. And it's quite a hard realization for the individuals within the business, because you're suddenly having to redefine people's jobs. Maybe you're finding out that those people aren't necessarily good enough or experienced enough to do this job, the job they've been doing at the higher level. And we've had to have some tricky conversations around that. So there's a lot that's going into that, and it's not a quick fix, unfortunately, because I'm having to fix myself as well. You know, my style as a leader has had to change, and you're having to, you know, in the past, I could just go in, identify a problem, go in, fix it, and go again, and you can move fast. This, you're dealing with lots and lots of people, and you've got to bring those people with you. You've got to identify the problems, and it's a challenge. But what hopefully we're creating is a solid foundation, so that you've got a system in place. I read something interesting, and it said that when someone buys a business, they're not buying your sales or your profitability. What they're actually buying is the system that you use to generate that profitability or those sales. So think of it like a franchise business. You know, in franchises, they're very clear. They build a system. That's not very common in other businesses. But what I'm realizing is that's what I need to create. So I've got to create a really strong system and structure, so that then we're ready to grow again. I have an expression in the business: we earn the right to get bigger. And right at the moment, we haven't earned that right. We're not good enough.
A very good one. Actually, I had that on my list as the next one. So if we were to zoom out in on the next 12 to 24 month, and we were to speak about the systems that you are to build, right, as the business, right? What are the core systems you feel you must get right to be ready for the 1 million a year phase?
I think they start with operations, because if you can't fulfill whatever it is that you're selling, you know, and that might be stock control, it might be purchasing, it might be manufacturing, it might be fulfillment. So there is a physical aspect to most businesses. So until you can get that right, you know, can you deliver on customer service? So the actual nuts and bolts of your business needs to be robust enough that it can cope with fluctuating demand, much higher demand, and be accurate. You know, do you know how much stock you've got in the business? Do you know, are you able to forecast how much stock to buy? So there's an operational piece that's first of all. Then I think you come away from that and you start thinking about models to do with scale, and how does your model grow? Your actual financial model that you're using in terms of new customer acquisition, customer retention, they're the same things that you did when you were smaller. You just have to do them better and in more detail. And you start being able to pick off a lot more areas. I think what most businesses, even to the size that we're at, they just get very good at one thing. You know, they get very good at ads. They get very good at short form social content, or they get very good at email. And you can build a 10, 20 million pound business just off the back of that pretty much one skill set. And I think that's what we've done. We're basically pretty good at email and pretty good at ads. And that built the business. Is that enough now going forward? No, not even remotely. And we need to make the transition. When you look at big brands, they are not spending hundreds of millions of pounds on bottom of funnel performance marketing ads, right? They are doing a brand awareness play. You know, even if you think about Facebook, you've got CPMs at less than £2 if you want to do something on brand awareness. If you're going for a conversion, you're going to be paying 8, 9, 10 or more pounds. Yeah. A lot more, right? So there is no way that big brands are doing that kind of conversion. They're looking at when you want to, in our space, when you want to get into mass market, you are aiming. You need to do brand awareness advertising. You know what Coke is doing. I saw some very interesting stats. There's a really good book called How Brands Grow, which if you haven't read, it's definitely worth reading. And one of the things in there, it looks at Coke's advertising strategy, and when you think about Coke, you think their average consumer buys lots of cans of Coke. But actually, it's not like that at all. The average Coke consumer is only buying Coke once or twice a year. So they've got these outliers of customers who are shopping every single day or every single week, but the bulk of their customers are only buying once or twice a year. So what Coke is actually trying, but that audience is gigantic, right? So what they're trying to do, the big customers, the customers who are buying 5, 10, 20, 50 times a year, are going to see the advertising and shop anyway. So what they're actually trying to do is to influence the purchaser who only shops once or twice a year to shop one more time. So, and they have to be there in their mind all the time to get them to do that, even 3 months later. And that's the change that we've got to make. It's a tricky change to move away from performance marketing towards that, but it's how you get mass market adoption. That's what our big challenge for next year is. How do we make that change? You move away from the addiction of bottom of funnel performance marketing, put a pound in, get £2 or £3 back out, and repeat the process. You cannot keep scaling bottom of funnel spend in that way. You just get diminishing returns. Sure, you can go and look at different ad platforms and so on, but ultimately you keep butting up against the same problem. Acquisition costs go through the roof as you increase spend.
Absolutely. And like, if we were to look at this, and thank you for the context about how you look at the things. So if we were to look from the perspective of management of these systems and like setting up the processes in a way that it's possible to get to that point where you've got gigantic audience. Like, is it your new head of marketing and head of operations that basically work with you on a daily basis to put a plan together about how to
it's a mixture.
transition?
I mean, one of the things that you have to be mindful of in my position is I need to employ people who are better than I am, that know more than I do. So I'm end up being the ultimate generalist. So I'm the only generalist left in the business with a little bit of knowledge across a whole raft of areas. So my thing is to look at the overall marketplace, look at the vision, present the vision, and then they're the experts coming in and to implement that and building out the team. They know what the structure needs to look like. Sure, I have an input in that, but that's what I'm paying them to do. It's about me setting the objective, the overall agenda of the direction of travel, of where are we going, and then I kind of have to be supportive and get out of the way. And that's hard, don't get me wrong, that's one of the changes that I have to do. I have to learn to let them, give them the freedom to execute on it, and take their advice and their guidance and let them run with it. But it's not easy. It's a big change for someone like me who's used to being in the weeds, being in the action and doing stuff. That's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
But the other interesting area is thinking about the organizational chart. So my office is I don't know if you can see it on the thing. I spin my camera around, right? Like I have
A lot.
I have 13 whiteboards around my office right now. The middle set of them is based on my organizational chart, and I keep evolving it. So, we are constantly rubbing that out and reframing it. So if you take marketing as an example, then I didn't know any different, and I initially thought, well, fine, I need a head of marketing. Let's recruit a head of marketing. That's the answer. That's going to fix all my problems. But then I realized actually marketing's a pretty broad thing, and and actually there's a whole raft of stuff in there. Are you dealing with a marketer who's fundamentally about brand and messaging and so on, and creative, or are you dealing with a head of marketing who's fundamentally about sales and commercial, or are you dealing with a head of marketing who's more about selling in TikTok Shop and business to business? So I suddenly became aware, having recruited a head of marketing, that maybe that wasn't all I needed, because they had very different skill sets. So now what we're looking at is probably 3 positions there. So a head of marketing who's dealing with the more creative element of that, a head of e-commerce who's dealing with our own website and everything that's going on in there, and then probably a head of sales on top of that who is going to be looking after TikTok Shop, marketplaces like Amazon, and business to business sales, because they're very distinct and different areas, and you don't get even at the top level, you don't get one person who's got all those skills, because we're not big enough. We haven't already built those teams out. So it's not like hiring a head of commercial, like who those people would all sit under, because that person's too removed. They're not a doer anymore, and I still need doers in a sense, like because the team's not large enough to do that.
Cool. Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about e-com plus fulfillment, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So you said that you're manufacturing around 30,000 pieces a day and shipping around 3,000.
It fluctuates. Depends on the time of year, but between 15 and 30,000 units a day. We order-wise, we do between 1,500 and 3,000 orders a day, depending on the season. We fulfill all our own orders, so we're shipping. We ship orders 7 days a week, and we manufacture 7 days a week as well. So we have a shift pattern where we have two completely separate teams. So they work 4 days on, 4 days off. Each separate team for manufacturing. So you've basically got 4 teams, and yeah, they work 10 hours a day, and yeah, it's a process. It's like manufacturing. I love the manufacturing. Fulfillment's a challenge. We've got a reasonably complex tech stack that knits all that together, from the website to a warehouse management system to a stock control and manufacturing system. And then we built a web application that sits on the top of all of that replaces all the API connections. Originally, we used to use the native API connections between them. And what we found was that if we got behind on orders, we might build up a lot of orders in the queue. And if that reached 10,000 orders in the queue, which sometimes it does, that's massively problematic because it wouldn't have reached our stock control system. So we were selling stock we didn't have. So the way around that was to construct this web application, which allowed us to replace all the API connections with our own ones. And we can take an order on the website, manipulate the order a bit, then push that to our stock control system so it knows about the order, allocates the stock. Then it goes into the warehouse management system and so on. So it gave us an awful lot more control.
And warehouse management system, is it like a public solution that you purchased, acquired, and then it's
both of those are public solutions. So with the warehouse management system we use is called MintSoft. Nice system, relatively low. It gets reasonably expensive as you get bigger, but entry point is quite cheap. I think you can start with them at £300 or £400 a month. It's got connections to all the couriers. It's got order rules as your orders come in. It's got automate. So we've got automated picking and packing. So it's all barcode scanned. We're batch picking. So you pick 16. Someone pushes a trolley around. The stock exists in one location. They pick 16 orders at the same time. So by the time they get the trolley to the end of the building, they have got 16 completed orders. It auto books in the courier based on order rules, depending on what's been selected. That ends up, they scan the order at the packing table. That generates the courier label. It generates the packing instructions. If they've done a gift message, it auto generates the gift message. And that then goes through and out and notifies the website to tell the customer it's been shipped and do all the sort of notifications.
And for the listeners, I don't think they know it from this podcast at least, but you guys only work and operate and fulfill only within the UK, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we do a tiny amount in Ireland, but no, and that's on purpose, to be fair. Our business is complex enough, and doing international orders makes it more complicated. So our thinking has very much been, we're in a big marketplace. So we reckon that we can do £100 million in sales in the UK. So we might as well concentrate on that for the next 2 or 3 years. And then once we get through beyond that point, then it's a different challenge and we'll go after, a global market. So it's definitely a conscious decision.
Okay, and with how many warehouses do you have, just for the context?
We've got 2 buildings, so we have about 40,000 square foot. So in meters, that's about 4,000 square meters. We've got about 80 car parking spaces, I suppose. So we've not got enough parking spaces and containers and so on the site. And we have 2 buildings side by side. So one we use for manufacturing, and the other one we use for fulfillment.
Awesome. Okay.
And then the last piece of software we didn't talk about is called Unleashed, and that is our manufacturing software, which is really good, great value software. and we use that for stock control and how to figure out manufacturing.
And your office, is it far from the warehouse? Also for the context?
They're all on site. We have a mixture of offices based on either we stick shipping containers in the space, like in the yards to add space on. So we've got about 10 of those done into offices, and then we're just building mezzanines at the moment. So one of our unit that does all the manufacturing, then we've just put a 50% of that as a mezzanine, and we've turned that into offices as well. So that's the direction of travel. The buildings are 14 meters high internal height, so they're 6 pallets high. So we've got plenty of space in there to put mezzanines in as we need to. So we could actually technically put 2 more layers in, but we haven't bothered. We're going to just do 1 layer, and so we can double the size space if we want to.
Awesome. Given that you're shipping up to 3,000 orders a day, based on what I know, from the e-commerce perspective, what has been the hardest scaling problem in the last 18 to say?
I think the biggest scaling problems are actually always around operations, because we had a colossal problem this year whereby we implemented a new promotional campaign. I read Alex Hormozi's book, $100 Million Offers.
Oh yeah, I read that one. Book. A very good one.
I read it first, then listened to the audio book, then got my team to listen to it, and then I said, right, go and put one of these offers in place. And they came up with an idea, and we put this live. And I promise, this is no word of a lie. We put that live, and our sales overnight increased by £200,000 a week, overnight. And it stayed flat as that. And that was a colossal problem, actually, because you think, brilliant. I mean, I was at the British Grand Prix when it happened, and I'm like, okay, hallelujah. Well, look at the sales coming in. But then there was the reality dawned of the implications of that, because first of all, we sold all the stock that we got in the building. Then we got all the components that our suppliers had. Then the suppliers gave us their other customers' components in order to keep up with that. And then it was a horror story, because the suppliers are talking about 3 months, 4 months lead times from Asia to bring components in. We can't air freight them because they're too heavy. So we were absolutely screwed, and we were then having to use weird shaped and size components, which then meant we couldn't use our automation, we couldn't use our automated lines. So then we got behind on orders. So that then caused, we have a metric in the business, which is the number of orders we've got in the queue at 5 p.m. and we would aim that to be under 500. Well, that spiked to more than 10,000. Wow. So then 3 or 4 days later, you've got massive complaints coming into customer service. So we would again aim to have less than 50 support tickets in the queue. We had 1,200 support tickets in the queue. We had to turn the phone lines off because they couldn't cope with answering. The customer service team couldn't cope. Within the space of about 3 weeks, we added 90 members of staff into the business. They are untrained. So then they're slow at what they're doing. That caused costs to go through the roof. So even though we've got this colossal business coming in, it was an absolute nightmare. And that was in July. And it took probably 4 months, nearly 5 months to unravel and resolve that. And that made us really realize, if you'd have asked me mid-July, have you got any problems in the business? I'd go, no. Operationally, we're really sound. We know what we're doing. We're in control. We're ready for Christmas. Right? We've got this sorted. And then the wheels completely came off the business because I hadn't prepared the business for really significant growth. The business didn't have the expertise. It didn't have the systems in place. It didn't have the people in order to cope with that. And that was a very, very painful process. We had loads of negative reviews. It cascades downwards. Operational problems just stack one on top of the next, on top of the next. And that was a really tough period of time for the business. But to the outside world, to the top line, you think, brilliant, they're doing an incredible amount of business, and we were. And the nice thing is we've maintained that since, but not without a real lot of pain within the business for going through that.
Gotcha. And like, if we were to kind of like see the results of it, and given that you're saying about the negative reviews, et cetera, can you share some insights into your and into how what your vision is like in terms of how to recover that business name health?
I think you just have to do the right thing by the customers. You have to be honest. You have to hold your hands up and tell them what's going on. We had a community, and I started doing lives on there to talk to that community, just to try and explain, to hear their complaints and explain some of what we were doing to resolve it. They don't ultimately care that much. They just want their product on time. They don't want the aggravation. But you have to get in front of people and tell them what's going on. Inside the business, it causes a lot of stress, and so I had to spend a lot of time talking to my senior team and the juniors and the everyday person within the business, explaining, we're trying to fix this. This is what we're doing about it. I understand what a nightmare this is causing you in your day-to-day job. I learned a lot as a leader through that period. Gave me a lot of sympathy, I suppose, with companies like British Airways during COVID, who had a similar problem. You can't train your customer service team quick enough, and when you've got hundreds of thousands of people suddenly trying to ring you, it causes a meltdown in your customer service operation. And I now have a lot of sympathy for businesses going through that. And one of the things we're doing now is we're trying to build in redundancy, trying to build in capacity to scale. So we're looking a lot at AI to support our customer service team. We just employed a full-time AI guy, who's developing a customer service app for system for us, and that's in its first stage trials. Looks really positive, and so that all the time allows us to scale better. I think there are other things that we might do differently. We might look to outsource some of our fulfillment in the future to give us the ability to flex, so that we can cope with, say we take half of our orders and fill them ourselves, and half we put into a fulfillment center. So although we give up a bit of margin, we've got the ability to flex, so that if big orders come in, the fulfillment center can flex the orders in a way that we can't necessarily. So it's about contingency plans. It's about recognizing that. Would I do something differently next time? I think there's an element, if I have my time over again, when I realized how successful the offer was, maybe I should have dialed it down a bit, because I could have slowed down the ad spend to control the sales a bit, to actually make it more manageable. But it was I was too gung ho for that. I was just like, give me the sales, like bring it on. We'll fix it. We'll cope. But actually, we didn't cope. It was really hard.
Just so we all understand, what was the offer? Just so we understand.
So what we
What did
did
you offer?
is we I mean, Hormozi's basic model or basic strategy is to say, give people an offer they feel stupid to say no to. So in our business, our best-selling products are reed diffusers, and so we constructed an offer where they could buy 3 of our reed diffusers at more or less the same price as if they bought them individually. So it's at £40, and then we constructed a load of freebies that sat on the top of that equated to more value than the original £40. So they're basically getting the original thing that they actually wanted to buy, which is the reed diffusers. They're getting those completely free of charge, it feels like, because they're getting all of this other stuff. It made no difference to our margin. It was the same margin to our previous promotional strategy. It just worked really well. And we were able to, he said, add guarantees to it and get the naming of it right. So we split tested using ads, the name. So even before we'd got the product live, what we did was we took static image ads, put them into an ad set, gave it £100 budget for 24 hours. And the only difference between the ads, they were image ads, but the only difference was the headline was what we were going to name the product bundle. And we tested 5 different ones of that. There was we analysed the winner, but just based on the number of clicks. So whichever one drove the most clicks, we identified that as the winner. And then the day 2, we took that winner and iterated on it to get very similar to it, but different versions. That gave us a final winner. In fact, it was free for us to do, because although we just dumped that traffic onto the homepage, or it might have gone to a diffuser, I can't remember, but we didn't send it. We didn't have the offer created at that point, so we just dumped it somewhere else. Actually, we still made enough sales to cover the £100 that we were spending on it, so it was free. And we've now adopted that as a strategy for testing product names in the business. And it's a very simple way, and you rather than using gut feel or guessing what a product should be named, and naming products makes a big difference, we now let the market decide. And you just send it to a random page on your website. Your customer service team will get the odd person coming in and saying, oh, I couldn't buy this thing. And you're just like, sometimes we tell them what we were doing. Sometimes we say, oh, it's now, we're sorry about that. We were testing something. But it's a really easy way. You'd be surprised how much the product name makes a difference to the performance of an offer.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Thank you for the context. And like the last one to cover up and wrap it up on the fulfillment side of things. What do you think is still too manual or too fragile for the business in terms of the fulfillments, in terms of operations?
We're still. I mean, I went. About 3 weeks ago, I went to the Hut Group, who I don't know if you've come across, really big global retailer. They own brands like My Protein, if you know them, Look Fantastic, which is a beauty brand. They're a multi-billion euros a year sales, I think 5 or 7 billion euros a year. And they're based in Manchester, and I went to one of their main fulfillment centres in Manchester about 3 weeks ago. And it's fully automated robot picking and packing. That was insane to see that. They're shipping 600,000 orders a day from that warehouse. And you barely saw a member of staff. It looked super calm. If they'd have told me they could do 3 times that in a day, that it wouldn't surprise me. It was insane to watch. They've got 400 robots picking the orders, and it was incredible to see that. That's obviously the direction of travel, whether it's the direction of travel for us as a business, but that's the direction of travel for the industry. But it's obviously significant investment. And, people are the expensive thing. And it doesn't matter whether we're manufacturing product or we are wrapping and packing orders. People are where the money is. And in the UK, the minimum wage keeps rising. So it's expensive, and we choose to manufacture in the UK rather than manufacturing in Asia, which has got cheaper labour costs and cheaper factory costs and so on. But I think there are advantages in manufacturing in the UK because you've got shorter lead times. We can make something in the morning and send it out to a customer in the afternoon. So you have to play to your strengths, but it is more expensive. So the only way you get around that is more automation, better systems, better trained staff, and spending money on equipment to make the process more efficient. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, for sure. This is a wise strategy, especially given that the margins allow you to keep everything like internally within the country, and given that everyone is on site. To my memory, you guys are all in the office. Just a few people are
all
on
one building.
So it basically from the training and knowledge perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense. Tech-wise, let's talk a little bit about tech. Tech-wise, you're running your website on WooCommerce WordPress, an app in the middle, and then your warehouse management system. You even built a shop back in the days on Shopify, but never made it live because of the bundling functionality and some too complex functionality in terms of managing it. And
it was too slow, actually. In those days, bundling was not a native really part of Shopify. This would be back in 2019. And I built out a full version of the site because I felt like, Shopify wasn't as developed as it is now, but I just felt like that was the direction of travel and it would probably make life a lot easier. But the functionality at the time just wasn't there to support our business model. I don't even think they just about got Shopify Plus at that point, but it was still in its infancy, Shopify Plus. And I just couldn't make the website on Shopify fast enough for our use case for it. So in the end, we didn't go down that route. And now, I've got 4 developers, and they're all WordPress developers or WordPress/PHP developers. So it doesn't. We've got so much architecture within WordPress to support our system that there's too much sunk cost really to move to Shopify now. Though if I was starting again, there is no way that I would go down the route. I had a background in WordPress development, so that's also why I was comfortable on it. But if I was starting again, we wouldn't do that. It's pick your battles. Fight the things that are going to add the most value. Do I want to make glass? Well, no, because even if I double the price of my glass, I'm probably only going to add 15p's worth of value. The money's in the storytelling and the marketing at the end. where you're taking a value of a candle and turning it into something that's multiple times more valuable. So I think the art in business is to spend your time and effort where you add the most value, because ultimately that's where the most money is to be made. You may have to do some of the other areas first, but gradually I think you do less and less of the low value things and leave yourself with a bit where you make you add the most value at that moment.
Okay, and what does WooCommerce do really well for you right now, and where does it start to creak at 25 mil a year?
We've had to invest a huge amount in optimizing and architecture. So we have I suppose we've got, I don't know whether we've got about 15 servers now. Like with where by the time you've got load balancers sitting on the front, you've got redundancy where it fall over to back to a different system. You've got mirroring of the database to so that our internal teams are not thing. You've then got staging sites and so on. So it's pretty complex optimizing WordPress for speed at scale. It can be done. But it is a highly specialized field. Not a specialist. I'm not a specialist in that, but we have people that we work with who are. It is, so you don't have any of that problem if you go with a different solution. But you have a lot of flexibility. So by dealing with WordPress, we're not paying Shopify's processing fees, as an example, which can get bloody expensive. You're not paying for all the different apps that WordPress, WooCommerce plugins are far cheaper than Shopify apps, because the ecosystem is very different, and not least they're open source. So we would gradually recode anything that we were using as a paid plugin. We would gradually recode that, partly because we've then got control and we're not running loads of plugins which can make the site unwieldy, and you end up with a lot of code that you don't necessarily need. There are strengths and weaknesses on both sides. I think at our scale, it doesn't make a lot of difference. But at the growing phase, or if you're growing, it's probably easier to stick on one of the other platforms. But there are advantages and disadvantages in both routes.
If we were to speak in general, not about WooCommerce or Shopify in specific, like as a comparison platforms, like we are talking about WooCommerce being your core engine, like currently, and like we are talking about 100 million a year over the next year, right? So as the target revenue,
sure. I think it'll take us a few years to get there.
A couple of years to get to the 4x to what you've got so far, right? So do you have a feeling about what, like, any parts of your website that where you think hey, this will have to change in terms of your current setup? Like maybe you don't like the automations.
We're constantly rebuilding stuff on the website. As an example, we used to use within the inside WordPress, we used one of the one of the editors in order to create pages. I'm trying to think. God, it's ages since I've been in there. Anyway, we would use that to build pages and so on, but it's very heavy in terms of code. And so one of the jobs that we have done over the last 3 or 4 months is to remove that from the site. WordPress Bakery, I think it was called.
Bakery, okay.
Yeah, and we've removed that, and we've had to recode loads of those pages to remove that. So there's a whole raft of stuff like that going on that you're just constantly rebuilding things, tweaking them. I think of business and the website and conversion rate optimization and so on as being like a circle, right, that you go through, and you've got various points on that circle, and you just keep going round and round, and for 1 minute speed's an issue, 1 minute is something else, and you go in and you fix whatever's the main reason for that, and you go back around the circle, and now it's something else that's the issue, and you go and fix that. And I see that, to me, that's what business is. And on the web, it's very like that. Technology improves, what our requirement changes, and we are just constantly evolving. It's a bit like painting a bridge. You get to one end of the bridge and you just turn around and come back to the beginning and you start again. And I think that's what a website is really now. The technology is evolving so fast that you can't sit still with it. you're constantly, we're doing huge amounts of conversion rate optimization testing to see, and that constantly is iterating on the way that thing. We've just implemented Bloomreach, which is replaced Clay. We'd been with Klaviyo for years and years and years, and we just migrated over to Bloomreach. That's been a really big migration, but it allows this complete one view of the customer, first party data. You've got full personalization sitting in there between email, the website. You've got SMS, WhatsApp. It's all completely integrated. You're linking the customer. So the customer. The great thing about Bloomreach is what you end up with in most systems is you've got one view of the customer in email, one view of them in SMS, one view of when they come in on an iPad, another view of them when they come in on a phone, another view when they come in on their desktop. What Bloomreach is designed to do is to knit all those together. Every time you come in and it identifies you as that this is you, it takes that shard and joins it back up again. So you don't end up with all these disjointed views of who the customer is. They get knitted together. So it's been a really complex integration process, but it's used by some of the biggest retailers, both in the UK and the world. It's expensive, disproportionately multiple times more expensive than Klaviyo, but we think that's the future. But again, massive, big undertaking both to integrate it and then to train the staff to use it, which is what we're in the middle of. We're 6 months into that and we're nowhere near done.
Oh, okay. How long do you think it's gonna take you?
I don't know. We're now fully up and running in email in there, but we're still not actually using the rest of it. So now, and we need more expertise. So we use an outside agency to help us with that process. It's a challenge.
I can imagine. If you don't mind, I'm gonna read the next one because there are a lot of numbers that I just kind of like put together for myself. Given that you started the conversation about the customer, like the customer economics, retention, and all of that, and like the marketing in general about the specific customer. So you said once that your retention metrics are 80% of transactions are from returning customers, 20 are from new customers buying again within 30 days, and 55 to 60% of those customers turning into multi-purchase customers. Yeah. How do those numbers shape the way you think about your website, offers, and campaigns today?
So I think it's really important as a business to separate out new and existing customers. Because you need to have a strategy. As a business, you're always going to be losing customers with the best will in the world. So you have to, if you want to either stay the same or grow, you have to have a strategy for acquiring new customers. It has to be a complete model and a system for doing that. So that's the first thing. It's very expensive in the modern age to acquire new customers. So you need to figure out a longer term model of the lifetime value of customers to know that you're making money from them in the back end. Now, I think 30 days, the reason we look so hard at 30 days is to do with credit card repayments for ad spend. If in an ideal world, we'd make money on the first transaction, right? So then everything after that is profit in all subsequent transactions. But that's actually pretty difficult to do. So what we're more interested in is, are we making money in the first 30 days? Because the reason 30 days is so important is it's the repayment cycle of your credit card. So like, let's say I spend, whatever you spend on ads, if I can get that money back before I have to pay for it to Amex, then I can recycle the money. So I can grow indefinitely as a consequence of that. We typically, as you said, get 20% of customers make a second purchase within 30 days. So that's where that model goes. And then you've got the lifetime value. Now, not every customer comes in and makes a second purchase, but for us, it's between 55 and 60%. Once we get them to make a second purchase, they tend to turn into long-term customers. Your returning customers is your sanity. We drive most of that through email. We do a little bit of advertising to our existing customers, but not a massive amount. It's primarily email, and we're big emailers. So that's why you can feel confident. You have to build a model and a system for that that's repeatable, and that's how you grow a business significantly in figuring out that. As you grow, though, it gets more expensive, and you have to constantly revisit that. You have to constantly revisit the offer, the landing page, the ad. The offer, the landing page, the ad. And you just keep going round. Are you getting the results that you need, whatever those are for you at that time? If you're not, then one of those pieces is not good enough. And you go around and you figure out which one's not good enough. You do some optimize on that. Hopefully that gets you back on track. So you need the metrics in order to course correct all the time, to give you the constantly. It's like a rudder, and you're just literally, as you dip one way or the other, you think, all right, I need to come back to it again. So and it's a constant process over many years, months and years and so on of doing it. It's the same exercise that we've been doing for 5 years, and we're still doing it now.
For sure. And I mean, obviously you seem to be great at metrics, at retention rates in terms of reselling to the same customer, to the first time customers over the next 30 days after the first purchase. But you once said that you are good to lose or break even on the first order from the first time customers. What do you think that most of the other business owners or like e-commerce owners, directors, whoever, basically lose or underestimate about the relationship between the three, basically the acquisition, the retention, and the product economics?
I think most businesses just aren't spending enough money on new customer acquisition. I would say that's why they're not growing. So anyone who is growing a lot will be spending a lot of money on new customer acquisition. And it's a challenge, but I think most businesses are not growing actually that quickly. And typically they are just underestimating the amount of money and time and effort you need to spend on new customers. We don't spend much on advertising to our existing customers and so on. We kind of want them to come for free. So I think that's where most businesses they just don't do enough activity around new customers. It needs, we strip out all the metrics. We look just constantly at what's happening to new customers. Are we retaining them? How are we getting them? What's the average order value of those new customers? How long? I saw a great thing many years ago, and it described business. You think of business like a bath. And you've got the tap is pouring new customers into the business, and the plug is losing customers. Well, if you pour more water in than runs out the tap at the bottom, your business is going to grow. Conversely, if you lose more customers than you acquire, you're going to get smaller. It's a pretty simple way of thinking about a business. And if the two things are the same, you're going to stay the same in size. So I wasn't interested in staying the same in size. So I went really into the weeds of figuring out how do you acquire customers, how do you do that. We look a lot at other companies. So one of the great things about online is everything's pretty public, pretty transparent. So we not necessarily competitors of ours, what we identify are other businesses who are e-commerce companies primarily, who are growing really quickly. Now they're not growing really quickly by accident, so something there's working. So then you go and be a customer for them, go and look at their ads, go and look at their landing pages, go and look at their upsells, go and look at their opt-ins, look at their emails, look at the shopping experience. Something in there is working really well. So we unpick it and we think, okay, what bit of that can we learn from? And then we go and apply it in our business. So I heard most people are not as good as they think they are. And there's so much to learn. I'm learning, I'm 52 years old, right? I'm learning more now than I've ever learned before. Every single day I spend the bulk of my time studying and learning, looking at other businesses, looking for ideas, watching podcasts, reading, and then I filter that into the team. It's like, go and try this, go and try that. That's interesting, have a look at this. And that's how we learn as a business.
I love the way you basically turn and script the videos, and instead of watching the 1 hour video or like podcast or whatever, you basically turn it in a script that have AI create a digest for you. You read it. If it's interesting, you put it into the Notion, and then the entire team basically creates the entire Notion for the team. 100%. Yeah, I love that.
It's a game changer. It's changed everything about the way that we work in the business. It's changed the way that I'm learning, and it's faster, because ultimately now I think the interesting thing about the time we're coming into is in the past, right, knowledge was the currency, right? So big businesses had exclusive rights to knowledge. They had the research departments, they didn't share it. So that was one era, right? Then we came into the early days of the internet, right? Suddenly it was about knowledge. Could you go and find the right information? Could you uncover that, right? We've gone beyond that now with AI. It's not really about knowledge anymore, it's about execution. Can you get the knowledge quick enough and execute on it? That's where the challenge is now. It's not about uncovering the knowledge. Everyone's got the knowledge now.
Yep.
If they're prepared to do the work, right? If they're prepared to use AI, they're prepared to use their brain, anyone can get the knowledge now. So that won't protect you. What will protect you in your business is execution, speed and execution. Can you actually translate that knowledge and idea into a reality and do it? And that's what you have to get really good at.
Cool. If we zoom out from tools and look at 2026, what would be the dream setup for you look like from the data and decision making perspective? Like, what would a grown-up 100 mil ready to go Valentte brain look like, if you will?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it's a relatively small number of objectives that the whole business is working towards, and that each person owns something that no longer, that for me, it was always me owning those objectives, having the vision and going out and achieving those. I don't think we can work like that anymore. I have to get to a point where my senior team own the objectives. They're going out and achieving them, and I'm almost sitting behind that and just, supporting, mentoring about and giving them the tools and the belief to go out and achieve it. So it's not me doing it anymore, and that's quite a hard change.
Cool. There will be lots of D2C founders who will be listening to this podcast, and they still sit between £1 million to £10 million a year, and they are dreaming of your 25 mil mark a year. What would you say one mistake is that they should avoid by any means, and what do you think the process or
not
principle that they
the biggest one is not trading profitably. If I could look back over periods of time, it's going for growth and not making sure we were profitable day in, day out, because profit is sanity, right? So you need to keep, it's no, you can't, we've never wanted to raise outside funding, but even if you do, you give up big chunks of your business. So profit is sanity. Trade in a way that is sustainable and profitable. Even if not massively profitable, you can go into growth, but just make sure you're profitable day in, day out, and 365 days a year, not just in peak season. So that's where sanity comes from. And I love the Alex Hormozy question. Have you got an ad problem or have you got a business model problem? I always thought, right, that I had an ad problem. My ads weren't good enough. That's why it's costing me so much money to acquire my customers. But I suddenly realized that's not true at all, right? I've got a business model problem because I'm not making enough money from that customer, either in the first transaction or in the repeat transactions. Because if I was making more money in the repeat transactions, it wouldn't matter how I could have the worst adverts in the world. Even if it was costing me £30 to acquire a customer or £40, if I'm making £100, I don't care. Right, so it's not about, most people think they've got an ad problem. The truth of the matter is you probably haven't. You've actually got a business model problem. And when you figure that out and start really unpicking your business model, it changes everything.
Cool. Awesome. And the last one to wrap it up, you've once said publicly about, and like basically on this podcast in the very beginning, that you would like Valentte to be a $1 billion business at some point in the future, right? So when we imagine Valentte in 10 years from now, what do you hope still feels the same as it is today, and what absolutely has to be different?
I hope that what feels the same is the hunger and the desire and the enthusiasm for the challenge. It's just the excitement of building something, creating something from scratch, working with great people who are hardworking, intelligent, and best in their field, who are solving hard problems. And we are, I hope that I still am doing the same thing, working at the cutting edge of a business, doing things I've never done before, and solving difficult challenges with interesting people. So I hope that the culture still looks like that. I hope that I'm still good enough to be leading the business, because ultimately the day I stop doing this will be, and handover will be the day that I don't have the ability to keep learning, to keep sitting at the front of those people, inspiring them and having the knowledge. And I'll be honest about that. If I don't have that, then I'll put someone in who does, who does have more ability than me. But right at the moment, I'm still enjoying that challenge of learning. What don't I want in the business? I think it's the stress that comes with cash flow constraints. We're self-funded. We have no external funding beyond debt finance. I own 100% of the business. Growth is incredibly expensive, whether you're acquiring customers, you're buying equipment, you're employing ever more staff to run a more complex business. That is hugely stressful. Stressful for me personally, stressful for my wife. And if I could change anything, it would be to decrease that, to increase the working capital that we have within the business, so that we are not constantly under so much financial pressure. Because that doesn't lead to good decision making, because you're constantly, it makes you a bit more erratic than you need to be. So ultimately it's not good for the business or for me personally. So if I had my dream, if I could click my fingers and do something, it would be to fix that without having to give up some massive stake in the business. So I want my cake and eat it. I want to retain ownership of the business, and I'd like to have a nice large pot of money so that we're not under stress financially.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at this stage, I think that's one of those things that you'll want to take care of. Look, this was brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time and going really beyond your original story, and sharing some insights into what it feels like to run and prepare the 25 mil brand for the 100 mil run. Everyone who's listening who hasn't tried Valentte yet, please check them out at valentte.com. I'll leave the link down below in the description. Luke, thank you so much again for joining, for sharing everything, for sharing your vision from the perspective of scalability, security, tech-wise, operationally, fulfillment, etc. It was great to have you here.
Jack, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation, really enjoyed the chat, and thank you. Thank you for having me on.